He ordered prisoners lifted into the air and lowered slowly onto sharpened wooden stakes, guiding the angle so the victims wouldn't die too quickly. Some lived for hours, others for days, trembling, choking on blood, their bodies twitching as the stake pushed upward through their organs. This is not folklore. These are documented executions carried out under the command of Vlad III of Wallachia, the man the world would later remember as Vlad the Impaler. He once created a field of more than 20,000 impaled corpses and waited for invading armies to find it. He burned entire families for minor crimes. He mutilated women accused of infidelity, skinned thieves alive, and nailed hats to the skulls of foreign envoys who refused to remove them. When he ran out of criminals, he executed peasants for being poor, lazy, or simply inconvenient. These weren't isolated acts of cruelty. They were policy. Vlad III was born in 1431 in Transylvania, a region torn apart by war between the Ottoman Empire and the Kingdom of Hungary. His father, Vlad Dracula, belonged to the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric group dedicated to defending Christianity. But Wallachia was a land where loyalty shifted daily and alliances were bought with blood. From childhood, Vlad was surrounded by betrayal, torture, and executions. At 11 years old, he and his brother were taken as political hostages by the Ottomans. There, Vlad witnessed some of the empire's most brutal punishments: floggings, amputations, burnings, and, most importantly, impalement, which the Ottomans used frequently. The young prince learned a grim lesson: fear controlled people far more effectively than words. When he eventually reclaimed the Wallachian throne, he brought those lessons with him, sharpened, refined, intensified. Contemporary diplomats described him as intelligent, disciplined, charismatic, and terrifying. He spoke multiple languages, understood warfare deeply, and possessed a mind shaped by paranoia and rigid absolutism. Every threat felt personal. Every slight demanded punishment. And he saw mercy as weakness. His psychological profile matches extreme psychopathy, emotional coldness, ritualized violence, obsessive need for control, and pleasure in public suffering. To him, cruelty was not chaos, it was order. He believed fear purified society. He believed agony taught obedience. And he believed his rule would be respected only if it was feared. The most infamous example of that philosophy occurred when Vlad invited Wallachian nobles, boyars, to a feast. As they ate, he confronted them about their past betrayals of his family. Before they could react, soldiers stormed the hall. The older boyars were seized and impaled immediately. The younger ones were marched away and forced into slave labor until most died. It was the beginning of a reign defined by ritualized brutality, a reign that would soon reach depths of horror Europe had never seen. The most chilling event of Vlad's early reign came during what appeared to be a peaceful feast. He invited peasants, merchants, and craftsmen to celebrate a local festival. After hours of drinking and eating, when the hall was warm and loud with conversation, he quietly ordered the doors barred. Soldiers poured in. In moments, joy turned to terror. Dozens of people were dragged outside and impaled in a line visible from the banquet window. Vlad returned to the table, lifted his cup, and told the remaining guests that this was a lesson. A ruler must eliminate the useless and the disloyal. His voice remained calm, his expression unchanged, as the dying cried out behind him. But this was nothing compared to the horror of his most infamous performance, the banquet among the dead. On another night, Vlad invited local nobles and foreign envoys to dine at his fortress. The tables were covered with roasted meat, wine, and fruit. Then prisoners, accused of petty theft, unpaid taxes, or disobedience, were marched into the courtyard and impaled on tall stakes arranged around the dining area. As the victims screamed, Vlad calmly ate his meal. He occasionally pointed at a twitching body and commented on how long that particular victim would survive. Some guests vomited. Others fainted. No one dared speak. Chroniclers claimed he dipped bread into bowls filled with blood collected from the dying. Whether literally true or embellished, the story captures a deeper truth. Vlad wanted to be feared like a creature beyond human, a ruler whose power came from terror. His cruelty spread far beyond castle walls. When peasants fled taxation, he impaled entire villages. When merchants overcharged customers, he executed them and displayed their bodies in market squares as warnings. When a woman complained about the smell of corpses rotting on stakes, Vlad ordered her impaled for criticizing justice. Punishments were meticulously designed to maximize suffering. Adulterous women had their sexual organs cut out. Suspected traitors were skinned alive. Thieves had a hand nailed to their heads. Soldiers who fell asleep on duty were impaled next to their posts. But nothing defined his reign more than the forest of the impaled. During a major Ottoman invasion, Sultan Mehmet II marched into Wallachia, expecting a straightforward conquest. Instead, his army entered a valley filled with tens of thousands of impaled bodies. Men, women, children, soldiers, peasants, arranged with horrifying precision. The smell hit first, a suffocating mix of rot, waste, and disease. Then the sight. Endless rows of swaying corpses, some fresh, some blackened, some half-eaten by animals. The horror was so overwhelming that the Ottomans stopped their advance. Even hardened warriors refused to continue. According to several accounts, the Sultan looked upon the field, muttered that a man capable of such things could not be defeated easily, and ordered a retreat. This moment cemented Vlad's legend, not just as a cruel ruler, but as a figure who weaponized fear on a scale rarely seen in history. Vlad's terror was not only physical, it was psychological. He understood how to use fear as precision warfare. When he learned that Ottoman scouts had been aided by several Wallachian villages, he launched a punitive campaign designed not merely to punish, but to annihilate hope itself. At dawn, his soldiers surrounded the first village. No warnings, no accusations, no trials. Families were dragged from their homes, tied together, and marched to the central square. The men were separated from the women. Children cried as soldiers prepared stakes. Vlad arrived moments later, observing quietly from horseback as the executions began. The victims were impaled in patterned rows, spirals and circles arranged like grotesque sculptures. He did the same in the next village and the next. In a matter of days, entire regions were transformed into sprawling fields of the dead. Travelers reported that even animals refused to approach. Birds circled overhead in black clouds. Wolves prowled at night, feeding on the remains. The stench carried for miles. Meanwhile, Vlad maintained an image of cold efficiency. He documented executions meticulously, writing notes and issuing decrees with methodical calm. Chroniclers described him as eerily composed, even graceful, in the presence of death. Some said he appeared energized by suffering, as though cruelty was fuel. His cruelty was also deeply personal. When a woman allegedly committed adultery, Vlad had her breasts cut open and her skin peeled away before impaling her. When a mistress claimed to be pregnant, he ordered her abdomen sliced open to prove she lied. He watched her bleed out on the floor. These acts were not strategic. They were expressions of psychopathy, sadism directed at individuals who touched his pride. Vlad's ruthlessness extended to foreign envoys. When Turkish ambassadors refused to remove their turbans before him, claiming it violated their customs, Vlad ordered the turbans nailed to their skulls. They were sent back with permanent respect. He viewed disobedience as contamination. In one notorious case, he gathered the poor, homeless, and sick into a banquet hall, promising food and protection. After they ate, he sealed the doors and burned the building. As flames engulfed the hall and screams rose behind the walls, Vlad declared he had purified Wallachia. Stories like these spread quickly through Europe. Merchants whispered about a prince who feasted among corpses. Soldiers told tales of a ruler who could walk through fields of death without blinking. Diplomats warned their kings that Vlad was a man who ruled like a plague, unpredictable, unstoppable, and merciless. But while fear made him powerful, it also isolated him. Boyars hated him for killing their families. Peasants dreaded his unpredictable punishments. Foreign powers saw him as an unstable madman. His paranoia deepened. His punishments grew harsher. and the circle of those he trusted grew smaller and smaller. His downfall was inevitable, but when it came, it matched the brutality of his life. The end began with betrayal. Vlad's reign of terror had left deep scars across Wallachia, and hatred simmered beneath the obedience he demanded. Boyars who survived his purges plotted quietly. Villagers whispered prayers for deliverance. Foreign courts debated whether he was a strategic asset or a destabilizing monster. But the decisive blow came from the one man who knew him best. His younger brother, Radu Chilfrumos, Radu the Handsome, who had risen to power within the Ottoman Empire. Radu was charming, diplomatic, everything Vlad was not. The Ottomans backed him as the civilized alternative to the Impaler. When Radu marched into Wallachia with Ottoman support, many villages surrendered without a fight. Vlad's terror had given them nightmares, not loyalty. Forced into the mountains with a shrinking band of loyal soldiers, Vlad fought like a cornered animal. He launched night raids, ambushes, and scorched earth attacks, leaving burned villages and impaled corpses along enemy routes. He terrified Radu's troops, but numbers overwhelmed brutality. Vlad's resistance shattered. Desperate, he fled to Transylvania, seeking protection from King Matthias of Hungary, a former ally. But Matthias, pressured by European powers horrified by Vlad's atrocities, imprisoned him. Vlad spent more than a decade in captivity. Even locked away, his cruelty persisted. Guards later claimed he impaled rats and birds with sharpened sticks in his cell, recreating miniature execution scenes to pass the time. He arranged their bodies around the room in tiny fields, as if unable to live without the rituals of suffering he had perfected. Ironically, political shifts eventually freed him. Hungary needed a fierce commander against the Ottomans, and no one inspired fear like Vlad. He was released and briefly restored to the throne. But Wallachia, exhausted and traumatized, did not welcome him. His second reign lasted months, not years. But it was enough time for executions to resume, more traitors impaled, more peasants punished, more rivals slaughtered. The cycle had restarted, but support had not. His death came abruptly, during a skirmish on the edges of Wallachia. Accounts differ, but the most accepted version is bitterly fitting. He was killed by his own men, who mistook him for an Ottoman during the chaos of battle. Others claim he was murdered intentionally by boyars seeking revenge. Whatever the truth, Vlad died violently, surrounded not by allies, but by confusion and blood. Ottoman soldiers found his body, severed his head, and sent it to Sultan Mehmet II. The Sultan ordered it displayed on a stake in Constantinople as proof the Impaler was dead. Crowds gathered to stare at the face of the ruler whose name had traveled across continents in whispers. His body, without its head, was buried in an unmarked grave. Its location remains uncertain, lost to time, perhaps deliberately, as though the earth itself refused to claim him. After his death, the stories only grew. Chroniclers described the forests of impaled corpses. Merchants told tales of the banquet among the dying. Soldiers repeated the legend of the valley, filled with tens of thousands of stakes. Over centuries, these accounts shaped the character of Dracula, not a supernatural vampire, but a human monster whose real cruelty eclipsed fiction. Vlad the Impaler did not need fangs or immortality. His legacy was carved in terror, not myth. He lived as a tyrant, ruled as a butcher, and became eternal not through magic, but through fear. History remembers him not as a prince, not as a hero, not as a defender of his land. It remembers the forests of bodies he created, the screams that echoed through Wallachia, and the ruler who transformed cruelty into his empire.